Hey, what's going on, everybody? We have Gabe DeArmond here. Covers Missouri for PowerMizzou and the 24/7 Sports Network. Let's get into it. Miami, Missouri first round matchup. They're going to play at 10:10 Eastern Friday night in St. Louis, the first round of the Western region. Missouri 20-12, coming in with three straight losses. Gabe, just we'll get into some more of the details, but just how would you kind of sum up this team and kind of characterize it and how they've been playing of late?
Yeah, go into any given game and Missouri could win or they could lose by 20, and neither one surprises me. I mean, it has been so up and down. They were one of two SEC teams to beat Florida during the regular season. They won at Kentucky for the first time ever. They won at Texas A&M, which I think was a huge game for their seeding. They also lost to Notre Dame, and they lost games to the 15th and 16th seed in the SEC and Ole Miss and LSU. I don't know. Summing up this team is absolutely impossible. They have one guy that I know is going to show up every night, and everything else is a guess.
We'll get into Mark Mitchell in a little bit. I assume that's who
Yeah.
you're talking about there. Miami saw Florida as well, and it didn't go real well in that game. But I think there's some things from that game that I'll get into a little bit. But what worked well for Missouri in beating Florida back there in early January?
Well, a couple things. Florida was not playing the way Florida is now playing, right? I mean, that has to be, it was the SEC opener. Missouri was coming off a 43-point loss to Illinois, which was, I mean, the worst loss in that series history. And I got on our post-game show that night and told people they weren't allowed to talk about the NCAA tournament because this team was incapable of that. They had almost 2 weeks off, came back, got Florida at home, which helped. But also, Florida is oddly a better matchup for Missouri than a lot of Missouri matches up better with Florida than it does with, say, Alabama, because Alabama can just run and just shoot you out of the gym. That's not what Florida does. They play inside out. Last year's Missouri team shot tons of threes and was very reliant on it. They went cold at the end of the year, and Dennis Gates clearly rebuilt this team saying, we're not going to rely on jump shooting. We're going to be built inside in the paint. We're going to get to the free throw line. We're going to score two. And that's what they've done. So that's kind of what Florida wants to do too. And Missouri just did it a little better against them on that particular day.
Okay, when we get to the NCAA tournament, and look, Miami and Missouri are meeting for the second time. They met in the first round, actually in the Western region back in 2002. Missouri won that game. When you get to the tournament, it's always fascinating. Different conferences, styles is a big thing. But as you're mentioning, some of the things that Missouri wants to do or has done well, that's where Miami has done well too. Look, they're not going to shoot threes either. They don't shoot threes. They want to get to the paint. When you look down at the breakdowns of both of these teams of where they get their points from threes, twos, and free throws, it's very similar. And when you just look at the starting lineups, it's going to be somewhat similar in terms of size. Miami's got the traditional 4-5. They've got physical three. You've obviously we touched on Mark Mitchell with this matchup, or how has Missouri done when they faced similar styles of teams this season?
Yeah, they beat Florida, they beat Tennessee, which I think is built a little bit that way. Now those games were both at home, so it's a little bit different. They went on the road and played Kansas, which has probably better guards, but I think generally, traditionally, Bill Self likes to go inside out, and they got beat by 20 in that game. I mean, I think I can save us all a lot of time who are going to preview this game over the next 3 days and just post the Spider-Man meme. Like, it literally is like looking in a mirror. They both turn the ball over too much, but when they hold on to the ball, they're pretty efficient offensively. Neither one of them is great defending the three, but overall have solid defenses. Here's the thing I'm most interested in this matchup. Whoever's trying to protect a lead in the last 3 minutes, it might not be pretty because they're both terrible at shooting free throws.
I know, and Miami fans, we've talked about it all season long with Miami and their free throw shooting. What's interesting though, and Jay Lucas has said, look, we're going to shoot. Essentially, these are what these guys are.
Yeah.
He hasn't said that. I've been kind of saying that. When you look at their career numbers, some of them actually having career best in free throw percentage shooting. But Miami's just going to try to do it on the quantity. They want to make 19 free throws. If they're not going to shoot at a high percent, their philosophy is, well, we're just going to get to the line even more. So they still, that's what's fascinating, that they still want to get to the line, even though the percent as a team isn't great.
And it's interesting because Missouri's the opposite. They got to the line the second most of any team in the country last year, and I think they made something like 76% as a team last year. And now this year, I mean, Mark Mitchell he goes there so much. It's kind of like what you're talking about with Miami, where even if he only shoots 65%, like he actually gets a lot of points from the line. But Anthony Robinson went from like a 77% shooter to a 67% shooter this year. Sean Phillips, I think he ended the year close to 56%, but I mean, he had to shoot like 75% to get there down the stretch. He was at 40 for a while. Jaden Stone, Trent Pierce, T.O. Barrett all have been a little bit up and down from the line. So it actually was a surprise that that's something Missouri has struggled with. But like they lost a game at Ole Miss, they went 8 for 24 from the free throw line. And we say all the time, like, I think I could do that well, right? Now, I know I couldn't actually gain a yard against a Division I defense or something. I really do think I could go 8 for 24 from the free throw line in a basketball game.
Yeah, it is frustrating. One thing that Coach Lucas has done, he has not dwelled on it all season long. And it's not been like, oh, we've got to make our free throw, the way that fans have kind of watched this thing play out. For the ACC tournament, I was there in Charlotte and I was sitting, seats were great. Got to sit right behind the Miami bench. And Shelton Henderson, for me, is the big key on this free throw thing. Look, everybody else is going to kind of shoot their percentage. Ernest Uday is about a 50% guy. The other guy's around 75, maybe 80. But Shelton needs to be, he's the guy that gets downhill, he gets to the free throw line, and he doesn't shoot at a high percent. That's the one to me that has to be a little bit better. And what I was going to say is sitting right behind the Miami bench, watching Coach Lucas. Shelton missed a free throw, and Jay was definitely expressed his frustration on the miss there. So let's get into Mark Mitchell. Gabe, we touched on the numbers are great. 18-5 and nearly 4 assists. The numbers have gone up in his second year at Missouri. Coach Lucas coached Mark Mitchell there his first 2 years as assistant coach when Mark was at Duke, so he's familiar with them. However, we've seen, if you've watched Mark play over his 4-year career, and I remember him back in high school, he's developed. Where is his game right now? He's coming off back-to-back 32-point games. Where is he kind of right now as a player? Where has he developed the most from last season at Missouri?
Yeah, I think a lot of people would look at it and say, why would you were starting at Duke? Why leave? Well, because Duke kind of has this box where this is what you are, this is where you fit our system, this is what you're going to do. And Mark wanted a system that let him be a little bit more of an all-around player, kind of outside that box he was in. And he is Missouri's best passer. He's the second player in program history to lead them in scoring, rebounding, and assists in a single year. I thought he should have been first team All SEC, but made second team. Dennis Gates has said he doesn't think there's a player in the country that's more important to his team. And I don't know every team in the country, but I can't imagine somebody being more important than Mark Mitchell is to this team. Without Mark Mitchell, I don't think Missouri makes the NIT this year. He's the one thing that when you start the game, Dennis Gates knows. He's had 2 games where he wasn't in double figures this year. Those were both 9 points. You just pencil him in for even his bad nights are like 15 and 5, right? Now his good nights are 32 and 8 and 6 assists, which he's done kind of the last couple games. He's a guy that he actually was Missouri's best 3-point shooter in league play, which is interesting because he's not a good 3-point shooter. It's not high volume, but he shot like 45% on something like 1.5 attempts a game. The more difficult the shot, the more likely Mark is to make it. I mean, you will defend him perfectly, and he just throws these things in from impossible angles that you don't know how they got there. And the free throws are a huge part of it. He had a night where he went 1 for 8 from the line this year, and he's had nights where he's gone like 13 for 15. It is a huge variable for Missouri, and you can kind of tell those first 2 trips to the line. If he can make 3 out of 4 and he can get there 12, 15 times, the other team could be in for a long night. He's frustrating to defend because a lot of times Missouri's offense is just throw the ball to Mark Mitchell at the top of the key or the elbow, and he's just going to kind of ram his shoulder into his guy's chest until he's close enough to make a shot. And he usually ends up making the shot. The key for Missouri is when they've played teams that have guys that are athletic enough to, double team Mark, do they have somebody else that can beat you? When things have gone well, they've had guys do that. The last couple games, Mark's had career high 32 in each of the last 2 Missouri games, and they've lost both of them because nobody else has stepped up and helped him.
You know, as you're touching on Mark's game and his attributes there, I think I'm just thinking back, Gabe, when we talked about the Spider-Man meme. Look, Miami's guys, Malik Renew, their leading scorer. He
Mhm.
plays the four, and I think with the matchups the way it's set up, I think Shelton Henderson's going to draw that matchup with Mark because of Missouri going with that 4-5 with Trent Pierce and Sean Phillips. And I just think Renew, yes, he could face Mark, but I think that they'll kind of go with Shelton there. But Malik, like Mark, you didn't touch on it, but left-handed, and
Mhm.
wants to kind of get to the basket. And so that's going to be interesting. I think Shelton's going to draw that matchup. You touch on the other players. And this is what's great also too with the NCAA tournament. You try to find the connections. I touched on Lucas with Mitchell. He knows him. There's two teammates, two high school teammates. True Washington played with Trent Pierce. But the one that I think is going to be a lot of focal point and just kind of knowing Trey Donaldson, his high school teammate Anthony Robinson, back at Florida High in Tallahassee. They're both in the backcourt together. Certainly, it looks like they'll face each other at some point. What do you make of the Missouri backcourt with Barrett and Stone and Robinson? Kind of how things have kind of rotated there. And as you touched on, essentially somebody else has to step up with Mark playing as well as he is.
Yeah, breaking analysis here, right? Point guard play matters in the NCAA tournament. Missouri's has been so up and down. I mean, they started this year, they truly felt they had two of the top 15 players in the SEC, and Mark Mitchell and Anthony Robinson. Ants had a bad year. Like there's no other way to put it. About midway through the season, Dennis Gates said, if Ant Robinson doesn't play better, we don't have a chance. The odd thing is he hasn't played better, and they've still managed to get here. He had in Missouri's first game in the SEC against Florida, he had 19 points, 9 assists, and he was legitimately the best player on the floor in that game. Next time out, they win at Kentucky. He has 10 assists. Since then, he's lost his starting job. Is basically no offensive threat. He's still a really good defensive player. Had 3 steals in the loss to Kentucky in the SEC tournament, but the offensive game has just kind of deserted him. If Missouri could somehow find something where Ant goes back to being close to the player they thought he was going to be this year, that changes what this team is in the postseason. But like we're 32 games in, asking for something that hasn't happened to suddenly happen is really tough. I'm interested in the dynamic with the matchup with Trey there because Ant is a hugely emotional player. Like he's a guy that if you can get in his head a little bit and get him riled up, like you can foul that kid out in 10 minutes. But if he can keep his head, he has the ability to be dynamic. So I'm curious, does he go into this, hey, I got something to prove against my high school teammate and play better than he's played in 3 months? Or does he go into this, I got something to prove, and like he tries to do too much and it ends up beating Missouri? Because I think both are possible.
Malik's the team's leading scorer, and I felt like going into the tournament, I said it, I feel it. I feel like Trey's the key. I think for Miami, just the way he plays, we saw it in the ACC tournament, played well against Louisville, as others did, and then just against Virginia, it didn't go well. Trey didn't play well, Malik didn't play well, and Malik's been playing through a dislocated thumb injury, but he has been putting up some points and scoring there. But I think just Trey, everything he kind of brings on both ends, he got in foul trouble in that last game. I think that's key too. And I remember talking to him, and it's coming up now, more memory, but before the season started, talking to Trey about, he's looking forward to facing players, guys he faced in the Big Ten. He singled out some names, but I'm sure he didn't expect this matchup to happen, but I'm sure he's embracing it, and I'm sure he wants to have a good game. And he's kind of just like an even keeled when things are going well or not. He's pretty down the middle, and I think that really helps him. But he just has to play well for Miami in this one. Gabe, one thing that we didn't mention that I had on my notes, but Missouri's played well at home. 15-3 at home, 5-9 away from home. This game is in St. Louis. What's your take on that? What do you expect in terms of the environment? And Miami's somewhat similar. I was back at the game when they played the Gators. It was in Jacksonville. Now, that was a neutral site game, but it felt like 98, 99% Florida. The band was there, the cheerleaders, the whole crowd. It was definitely not a neutral site game. And I think that experience could help Miami in this one. I assume not expecting that kind of turnout for Missouri fans, but certainly there's going to be a lot. What do you think of that? How much will that be a factor in this one? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it is. If Dennis Gates handed the selection committee a sheet of paper before the announcement and said, "Here's what I want," he got it. And that's not disrespect to Miami. That's 10 seed when they could have been in Dayton. That's 125 miles from campus in a building they play in every year. Now, it went terribly when they played there this year against Illinois, right? But they're familiar with it. The early impression I get just from reading our message board, messages I'm getting from friends, Missouri fans are buying these tickets, man. It is going to be a road game for Miami. At least 85-15, maybe more. I think another thing that helps Missouri is like Illinois is not there. If Illinois was there, the Illinois fans would root against Missouri. Kentucky fans that are there, they'll probably root for Missouri. They're an SEC team. They'll probably root for Kentucky to beat Miami. Iowa State, I don't really know. Purdue, I don't really know. Teams generally, or fans that don't really care generally tend to side with the underdog in March, right? I don't know if there's a huge underdog in this one, but Miami is seated higher in a 2.5 point favorite. All that said, like, it doesn't really matter that much when the game tips off, right? If Miami can jump out to a 12-2 lead, and a lot of teams have done that against Missouri, the crowd shouldn't really matter. Missouri's going to have to give them a reason. Last year, Missouri played in Wichita, which is about 350 miles from campus. Perfect draw. They got Drake in the first round, and they just got beat up by a team that shouldn't beat them up in a perfect situation. This is, again, a perfect situation, but the building, the location isn't going to play the game. Missouri's going to have to show up and play well.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. I'm excited to see not just how the game goes, but just this buildup of the week, kind of as we dive into both of these teams even more and kind of seeing how it goes. But definitely, this is great. Both these teams wanted to be here. You touched on the up and down season for Missouri, for Miami. They got out to a good start and such a bad season last year, going 7-24. It's been quite a surprise in the sense that Miami's won 25 games this year. So looking forward to it. This is what's always interesting too. You touched on point guard play is important. That is important this time of year. But really looking forward to seeing how seniors play. This is it. This is their last go round. We see it all the time this time of year. These guys rise, and Miami's got 3 of them they've got to count on. They've got to be much better than they were against Virginia. So that'll be big for Miami. But Gabe, definitely appreciate it. This is great. Great breakdown of the Tigers. Again, you can see Gabe, find out more about the Tigers at PowerMizzou. But thank you.
Yeah, hey, Chris, one last thing that we didn't talk about. I'm sure you guys talked about it already, and we're going to talk about it a lot this week. Charlton Young going to be a popular interview here these couple days in St. Louis, right? He obviously was Dennis Gates' first hire at Missouri, and a lot of Missouri fans wondering, like, hey, he knows Ant Robinson probably better than anybody on Missouri's staff. He might not know this version of T.O. Barrett and Mark Mitchell, but he knows those guys, right? Like, does that give Miami something? Does he have something that he can tell Jay Lucas in these couple days leading up to the game, as far as scouting reports, because he did spend 3 years on campus here?
Yeah, absolutely. And then just adding on Marcus Allen was there. And just I'm sure your fans would be interested to hear he's doing well. It was fun seeing him at the ACC tournament. He surprised the team on the last day, showed up, went through warmups and everything with the team suited up. It was just great to see, even though it was disappointing how it ended. That was a really positive moment for this team. He's been such a big influence on this team. So another tie as we touch on all these ties between Miami and Missouri. And we didn't even talk about Frank Haith. But anyways,
right.
Gabe, it's been great. Yeah, it's great. And the CY situation certainly is going to be big as well. And just the familiarity. And they're going to continue to get to know each other, these teams. But as you mentioned, these teams are similar. They are similar. So we'll see how it goes. But thank you.